Senator Enverga.
Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I mean, it looks like our business sector are so keen to the idea of having an infrastructure bank, and I even heard something like mentioning that it's a good idea, and you mentioned too that we should go ahead, but time will tell. You know, it's unsure, and there's also a question of independence at this point, and there's even a recommendation that says that well, it might not be related, but could be related too, with regards to develop a comprehensive plan to broaden the tax base and bring down rates, set out the detailed, fiscally sustainable path to balanced budget with commitment to an explicit debt to GDP ratio. And with all these things here, would you still, with all this uncertainty, with all this question about independence, will the business people invest their money at this time, or would you be waiting for more information?
To invest in the
infrastructure bank.
In the infrastructure bank. Well, I mean, when we ask some of the challenge we've always had is that there's no shortage of money in Canada. We have huge banks, we have huge pension funds, we have huge insurance companies, and so when we've asked them, would they invest in an infrastructure bank, they say, well, look, as a pension company, their fiduciary responsibility is to maximize the risk maximize the return for the risk that they're taking. And so they're saying if the infrastructure bank can help with that. One of the challenges they sometimes have is, so an infrastructure project like a water treatment plant or a bridge, this is a 25-year project, and it's very hard for a bank to do the analysis of, is it going to make money? So they'll do it for very large projects, but if they're not sure of it, if there's not a credit rating, there's not a balance sheet, it's a project finance, so it's very difficult for them sometimes to analyze the risk. And because by nature these are long duration projects, it's sometimes difficult for private sector to invest in these long-term things. So an infrastructure bank that is set up by the government, that is capitalized by the government, would be a much better risk for a Canadian business or a Canadian investor than would just be some municipal infrastructure project in Saskatoon.
So you're investing here because there's a guarantee that the public will pay, just in case.
In some ways, yeah. I mean, that's certainly a possibility if there were guarantees, and so the bank is selling bonds. But again, it comes back to, we're not really sure what sort of projects that this infrastructure bank is going to be offering. They could offer infrastructure bonds. They could combine a whole bunch of smaller projects together and then sell those, or they could be looking at big, strategic, gigantic $2 billion bridges and things like that, so that a Canadian investor would come in and take a piece of it, but it would be credit wrapped or backstopped by the government. So that's kind of what the idea. Because if you look at the reports from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities or associations of engineers, the infrastructure needs in Canada are so enormous, $800 billion, that we really want to get more dollars there that don't come from our taxpayers. So if the infrastructure bank can help in that regard, that's why the business community can support it.
So the conclusion is you want it done, the businesses will do it, because there's really no risk for business people other than the fact that our taxpayers is on the hook just in case the business fails. Well,
if in the case of a loan guarantee, then the guarantee is coming from the government, so that does reduce it. But there's other ways the business community can invest in equity. They could invest in. The idea is that the infrastructure bank pulls more money into the infrastructure field. So there's lots of ways to structure it. But I think the private sector would share in some of the risks, but yeah.
Loan guarantees.
We don't.
Yeah. What kind of risk is that? Like, I mean, let's be serious here. Why